This segment is on conviction. So Quakers experience the living spirit that speaks to our human condition. So when we experience this spirit where we sort of are brought down low in the clay feet of our humanness, we find conviction. And the conviction comes from the word convicted. It's where we fall short, where we're inadequate, where we're broken, where we become the perpetrator, where we make mistakes, that we can experience the Spirit in a whole new way, a fullness, an experience of the Spirit beyond our own egos. If all we had was sort of the glorious mountaintop or all is well experiences, I don't think we could distinguish between the power of the Spirit and our own egos. But it's the blessing of our woundedness that allows us to see beyond our egos and experience the Spirit in a whole new way. Many traditions around the world say that mistakes are the cracks that God comes through. So mistakes are the opportunity to learn. Yay! What was the mistake? Oh, where can we learn something, right? Weaknesses are the opportunity to genuinely need other people, which creates community. So, yay, I've got this weakness. Hey, how can I reach out and draw on the strengths of others? Our failings are the opportunity to experience love and grace and healing and find this power that is so real and palpable in our lives. So, what a blessing. When we don't experience this power of the Spirit in those moments, in the hard and difficult times, then it leads to a sense of humiliation, and it wounds our egos, which then leads to violence and retribution and revenge. But when we have this experience of the Spirit, in every moment, even where it's really, really terrible and awful, then we are drawn into this experience of humility and compassion, and we find conviction. So some shortcomings come from our woundedness, right? And our wounds lead to distress patterns and sort of frozen needs, and we end up just reenacting and reliving this effort to resolve these unresolved pains or to meet these frozen needs. And we even start embedding it into our institutions and that kind of in our social patterns. And so we've come to understand better that this reenactment and reliving of trauma leads to violence and to greed and to so much other human suffering. And tragedy, human tragedy, both on an individual but also on a collective and societal level. So trauma sets in when we are overwhelmed and we freeze. It changes our body chemistry, and it leads to all of the symptoms and the consequences of trauma. So when we experience the power of the Spirit in those moments where just that human tragedy is occurring, we have this immense resource available to us within us. We see it in others. We see it in the situation around us. And so we draw on it. We are less apt to feel overwhelmed. We're less apt to feel alone. And so we stay in motion, and we're much more resilient to trauma. Just this awareness of the resource makes us resilient to trauma. This not feeling alone and the spiritual companions and the community that this work and life brings around us makes us not feel alone and so more resilient. So our staying in motion, our taking action, our commitment to expressing our inward experience in outward form keeps us in motion, and so we don't freeze and makes us more resilient to trauma. So I want to read to you a quote from John Woolman that speaks about the healing power of universal love and our own roles and our own part in lessening the distresses of each other. Here we have a prospect of one common interest from which our own is inseparable. that to turn all the treasures we possess into the channel of universal love becomes the business of our lives. So other shortcomings are the direct sort of suffering that we feel in moments where we feel such great loss or fear or anxiety, or that we're treated unjustly or we're hurt, right? In those moments, it can happen at any age, but especially when we're young, the wounds can be very deep. And we can't heal until we're ready to heal. And sometimes we're not ready to heal. I'm just not ready to give up my pain, right? But when we are ready to heal, we often cannot heal alone. And so the Spirit is always there, holding out a hand, even in the most difficult and most tragic moments. That offer of love, of life, of love, of healing is always there. And that's a model for us as a people. I can't make other people heal, but to try our best within our human limitations to be there and to say, whenever you are ready, please let us work together, and let us work together for our mutual liberation and our mutual healing. And we become a cheerful and an energetic people. And this was one of the early descriptions of Quakers. They were one of the reasons they were called the peculiar people, was because they were so cheerful and vibrant and raucous. We were described as raucous, and it was unusual. Later on in future generations, Quakers became known as quite somber, but it's not the actual experience. And it's so ironic that this leaning into our suffering and into the healing power and experience beyond that is what leads to the joyful, loving, cheerful presence on the earth.